That system.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Right. So, say for example, if you came from a family system that was a low trust family system, you're going to engage something you're not going to trust because it's not inherently what you do.
That makes total sense.
But then it gets really crazy. Like, so say you step outside of your family system and you learn trust, and then you go back into your family system.
And still don't trust.
So the
And then it's still
Lily
trust, but you're functioning in a different way
and
now.
Jessica, so must be they told
Hey.
Still says 6:30 on my watch.
It's close.
You only had the
I'm not sure I'm going to start quite yet, but.
I'm good. I appreciate it. Very prepared. Fresh notes.
Yeah.
I'll finish that conversation.
But yeah,
There's
thank you. There's a, right?
Yeah.
There's a ton of stuff.
Thank you.
Systems there.
I love that.
Budget finance. Come on.
What's that?
I got talking about numbers, Aaron, you know.
I know how that happens, but I got a number in front of me that says 6:30.
Exactly right.
one now, 6:31.
Mine's just clicked.
For once, it's not my fault.
Anybody really care about time? Nice, I'll let it get settled.
There you go. Before you ask him to stand up
Sing
again.
a little Chicago, that's all.
Oh, really?
We got the public hearing first.
Yes.
Public lining up and ask questions. All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. A minute late, but calling it to order. And our first order of work is the public hearing on the 25-26 budget.
Yes, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's meeting. We are going to start, Mike and I are going to run through the public hearing for the budget. As we do each year, we want to start by talking about what our approach is as we go about building the budget and sharing information. I always sound like an old timer because I've been here for so long, but I remember school years not that long ago where we were trying to make sense of information from the state that wasn't complete. And we would begin to build a budget and we would start to talk about some of the benefits or some of the drawbacks from the numbers that we were seeing. And I remember one year in particular when I was still a principal, I sat down with about 12 people and told them they didn't have a job based upon our early numbers. And the havoc that wreaked really taught us a lesson, because thankfully that wasn't necessary because the legislature threw in some additional money, which often happens, and we didn't have to have some of those high quality people go away. But long story short to say, what we've tried to do and what we'll continue to do is we want to gather to the best of our ability and disseminate facts as opposed to conjecture. So what we are going to do is just that. We're going to not stress people out, give you incomplete information. We're going to continue to work with our Budget and Finance Committee to create budget models that can really give you factual information that's been shared and to talk about the way that we are going to move forward with that. We just had a meeting as an example with our Budget and Finance Committee, and that's the process that we'll follow. We'll talk to those folks ahead of time, share some information, and then share it with the entire board as the budget season moves forward. So as I was saying, in the past we might have been really specific about what our governor has laid out there. Thankfully, we do have the governor's preliminary budget. Mike had mentioned in the Budget and Finance meeting that we were just in, it is, in an election year, the governor is trying to make schools feel really good about what it is that we're doing as far as funding sources. So the proposal that she's put forward right now has $37.4 billion in total school aid, including $1.5 billion in foundation aid, and that number results in each district receiving at least 2% increase in foundation aid from the previous year. It also includes some initiatives, and one of the things that you may have heard about is the expectation that she is going to outline plans for schools or direct schools to have what she's calling distraction-free classrooms. That is making sure that our kids are not traveling around with their cell phones while they're in the classroom. So she's earmarked $13.5 million to support that transition. At this point, it's not clear if there will be limits as to how it's used or how much specificity there will be. But that is going to be something that we actually started to talk about. We actually have, I believe, what we think is a reasonable solution that we have being used piecemeal throughout the district. At the high school, we do have some of our teachers that already have pouches that the kids put the phones in when they walk in the classroom. But it would be something like that, I think, for Homer, a reasonable approach. You know, at the intermediate, at junior high school, certainly at the junior high school, cell phones are meant to be in their lockers. And I don't necessarily think, we haven't really talked about it in a lot of detail yet. We want to get a better feel for what the governor's saying. But we don't believe that it's going to be a monumental shift for us, just maybe some increased funding to be able to support the purchase of some of the things to help us get there. But that's what the governor has put out so far, and again, you know the process. There will be a number of iterations of the budget from the state level as it goes through our legislature.
So I know this is Aaron's favorite, so we put up the dollar bill every year. Again, just to kind of show you our distribution of budget dollars for our current budget. 79%, and we are a people business, goes towards instruction. So 79% of our spending is earmarked for instruction. The other part is for general support, whether that be for folks working in offices, whether that be for our operations and maintenance. You're going to look at another 10% that goes towards general support when we put our budget together. The next part, and believe it or not, it's only 6% of our budget, it goes to pupil transport. That goes towards salaries for our employees in the transportation area, as well as our leasing of buses. School lunch comprises 2% of our planned budget. Believe it or not, as you look at our budget for school lunch, that's a budget of about $900,000. So, and that remains separate from our general fund. So our general fund budget is the one that our taxpayers vote on every year. The school lunch budget is a budget that stands alone. And the last piece is our debt service. So our debt service, any of our outstanding payments that we have on any of our past capital projects. They used to include the purchase of buses, but now we lease buses. So that's included under the transportation line, not necessarily under the debt service portion. So again, it's a good thing to know. We're a school, and 79% of everything that we budget goes towards instruction. Any questions there?
Are we fully converted to leasing buses? Do we actually own any right now, or is it fully
The only bus that we own is not used for pupil transportation, and that's the great big blue Pride bus that we take around. But that is the only one that we own in our fleet. Our revenue sources, how that breaks down. The big green piece of the pie is our tax levy and our STAR reimbursement from the state. They kind of go hand in hand as we put together our tax levy. Our use of reserves at 1%. Operating grants, so when you're taking a look at any of our federal monies, and as we go through the next few board meetings and talk about our expenditures and revenues, a good piece of that, 9% is spent, again, right in the classroom. 55% of that pie is New York State aid. And again, the last piece, local sources, E-rate, which is federal reimbursement for technology, and then miscellaneous, that we charge different groups for use of our facilities, whether it be BOCES host classrooms here. We also have other miscellaneous revenues that come in for different pieces of operation. So again, this is just our operating, our piece of the pie, our revenue sources for 24-25. Any questions here? So our budget guidelines, again, we want to develop and execute options really to maximize what we're doing with programming. If you think back probably 8 years ago now, we had a situation where we had several employees retire, And in looking at that, we said, okay, we're gonna have a little bit of revenue. What are we gonna do there? The board agreed to start pre-K. We started pre-K with 1 classroom. And again, that looked at how we were gonna maximize impact, going back through our budget guidelines. That's one that really hasn't changed. Again, use our strategic planning initiatives. When we make our budget decisions, how do our budget decisions line up with our strategic plan? Again, adopt the voice of the community. Unfortunately, in the wintertime, it's always not a great thing that we start the budget in the winter because we get more people here in the springtime. But again, community feedback. What programs are you looking at? And that's, again, it goes up to the point before, the people involved in the strategic plan, a lot of the surveys that we put out. What do you feel is important for your child's learning? Again, we look at developing the tax levy in compliance with the tax levy limit and the tax levy process. And the last piece, proactively minimize the impact of changing aid to our taxpayers in uncertain state and federal environment. One of the things today that we saw was a memo that I received just as I was walking out the door that talked about the freeze of federal aid. Now going through, the memo came out, freezing federal aid, and there was no explanation of what exactly it was going to freeze. But again, if you go back and look, the majority of that 9% of our operating grants are federal aid. Any questions here with the budget guidelines? And I believe you'll vote on those later in the meeting. So again, key considerations when we develop the budget for next year: contractual costs, salary and benefits. Again, the 4 bargaining units that we have, that we negotiate with, they have increases of 3 to 4% going forward. Our benefits, our health and dental benefits, they rise between 6 to 8% a year. One of the things that we found, that we have retirees have the option to stay on our benefit system. We have a lot of retirees seeking to leave our health insurance just because the costs increase 6 to 8% a year. Staffing, again, taking a look at the instructional caseloads, duties, and building schedules to determine staffing recommendations that we'll bring back to the board. And again, programming. What are we currently doing? Is there recommended new programming as it relates to the strategic plan? Any questions here? So just to give you a little sneak peek, I guarantee I will not show the video. My last year here as a business official, I will not. I've shown the video on how to calculate tax cap enough. I will email you the link if you in fact would like to review that on your own. It's always great viewing on YouTube. I think it has about, I don't know, maybe 700 hits from every business official in New York State we watch it. So again, the allowable levy growth factor for 2026, 2%. Again, remember it's not a 2% tax cap, it's a levy limit. The multiplier is 2%. What does it mean for Homer? Our actual tax levy is $17,535,266. When we go through the whole formula, and again, I spoiler alert here, the tax levy limit for 25-26 would be $18,269,780. A difference of $734,514, or you could increase without having to go to a supermajority, which is over 60% of the vote, at 4.19%. Again, these are preliminary numbers. You may see that 4.19 and the number above that. It may vary just a little bit because we're fine-tuning some parts of the formula. But again, this gives you a look at where we're at. This is a good financial position to be in if you needed to go to that levy limit. There are some districts their levy limits are negative numbers. So in order to go to a 0% increase, that district would have to have a 60% vote just to go to 0. So, and again.
And I know you said it, but just to repeat it, that is what we could go to
Correct. Without
needing a supermajority. We're not recommending it, we're nowhere near that point in the process yet.
Yeah, but this just kind of gives you an idea of where we're at. A Coming attractions, we have a board meeting on February 11th. We're going to discuss the tax levy limit in a little bit more detail and kind of look and see where the governor's state aid proposal a little bit more in depth. We'll actually have a budget and finance meeting prior to that meeting as well to discuss some of these options. Any questions? Any questions from the gallery? Because it is our budget hearing.
Thank you for breaking it down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oops, our budget hearing. So that, I'll invite us to stand for pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A motion to approve the minutes from our 1/14 regular meeting, and we'll just do it separate.
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And motion to approve the minutes from the 1/23/25 special meeting?
So,
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Do want to just, for my comments, add a little update on the fact that the superintendent search process is ongoing. We've had a chance to review some preliminary pieces. We've reviewed applications that have come in, and we'll be walking through the next steps in the coming months, or not even months, really in the coming weeks. We'll be sharing with the public different ways to engage that process. I know the survey has already gone out to the school community. We've gotten some of those back, starting to get that data, but just want to have folks remember that we're in that process, and soon we'll be engaging our stakeholders and our community in some different ways as we go through and navigate that process. Superintendent?
Yes, I had an opportunity to take a visit to the Norfolk Naval Shipyard, not last week, but 2 weeks ago, on something that is referred to as an educator orientation visit. It was organized by the recruiting command at HTEC Pittsburgh, and 8 superintendents from around the area, the same group really that's been going to junior ROTC programs to identify what our local ROTC program might look like. The same group went along, and it was a 2-day visit where we had opportunities to talk with a myriad of folks in a number of different departments, helicopter squadrons, hovercraft crews, the National Intelligence Command Center, just an incredibly impressive group of young people. But what was most interesting, which really helped us to try to better understand how we might better educate our kids about the opportunities, not just in the Navy, but in the military in general. We had each person that spoke to us talk about their path, not just the position they have now, but the path they took to get there. And what, again, having been around military folks most of my life, I do recognize there are multiple pathways, but in looking at how we have recruiters coming into our schools and the quality of that information that they share pales in comparison to what I think we should be giving to our young people. So next steps for this group is to continue to speak with the head of the recruiting command down in Pittsburgh, and to put together regional presentations that have the actual people doing the work dropping in with some of the tools and machinery that they use, as opposed to setting up a table in the hallway. Not that it's bad, to hand out brochures and to have kids do push-ups, but there's so much more to the military. Some of our best and brightest 19 and 20-year-olds making life and death decisions every day. Some that went in directly out of high school, some that went to a 2-year community college or a 4-year school and an ROTC program, or right into the military academies. just a phenomenal trip. And I had said to one of the folks that was leading the tour, I really wish that this base was right around the corner from our school district, because I don't think there's anything better than getting people on the base itself. But we can do so much better for our kids, and that really is what I came away with. One of the things, the last thing I'll say that was, again, not revolutionary, but it really hit home with all of us that were there. We spoke with a group of Navy SEALs, and I think most of us, when we think of SEALs, we think of the best and the brightest, and they're good at everything and always have been. But there was a special department that they have put in place now where they essentially rehabilitate SEALs that have failed out of the BUDS training that they go through to become a SEAL. And they work them back through till they're successful. And the phrase they kept using is failing forward, and how important it is to build an environment for our young people where they are set up to fail, encouraged to take risks and fail, and then overcome those. They said the people that they have the least amount of success with are the high flyers that have never had any sort of issues in their life in terms of, stumbling blocks or roadblocks that they had to overcome. And so it left all of us again talking about what can we do differently in schools so that we, from the time the kids hit our front door, we teach them that to take a risk and to fail is okay. It's not even just okay. It's going to make them better in the long run. So a lot of, I know I'm going on and on, but it was a great trip, and I'm even more excited about what's to come next. So thank you for indulging.
And now we have a board presentation looking at our district reserves.
We do, and this is the much of the information that Mike shared with our Budget and Finance Committee leading in. He's going to talk about a New York State Comptroller report that just came out and where Homer Schools fits within that report.
But I'll talk about the reserves plan first.
Yeah.
So everyone can see the screen. Do you need me to stand up and do I can stand up for you if you want. It's just easier for me to help to read if I'm not bobbing and weaving. So every year that we're required by New York State to put out a reserves plan. So in the last board meeting, I put it out as an informational item to give folks an opportunity to take a look. So as I go through this, please ask questions at will. It gets quite involved, and I will do the best to break down the verbiage. I take it right from what the state asks us to do, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's user-friendly as we go through. So with this, clicker to click. Again, the board is responsible for managing the financial affairs of the district. And again, money set aside in reserves has to be in compliance. So we have several different areas of reserves, and we have to make sure that they're spent correctly, they're funded correctly, and that there's oversight. So that's part of the reserves plan. Now remember, with our reserves, again, districts just don't come ready with reserves. Reserves are funded through taxpayer dollars. So all of the money in the reserves are funded one way, shape, or another through taxpayer dollars. And that's important to keep in mind as we go through this. The first one is the Employee Benefit Accrued Liability Reserve. We like to call that EBLAR. It's established by the Board of Education. It's funded with budgetary transfers. And voter approval is not needed to expend out of this. Really, the key piece of this is the fourth bullet down. It's used to pay for accrued and accumulated but unused sick leave, personal leave, holiday leave, vacation time, and other benefits paid to employees upon retirement or termination. That's important to know because almost every contract or terms and conditions that we have in the district has a clause where people can be paid out for unused sick time to go against paying for health insurance. So they are able to keep or are able to receive, if they've worked here a certain amount of time, that benefit that would help offset payments for health insurance. For most folks with a family plan, that may last into a couple of years. Anywhere up to $10,000 to somewhere $20,000. So you have to account for that with over 400 employees. When we look at this, it can't be used as a retirement award. So if there's early a teacher a retirement incentive, you can't use money from this reserve to pay for that. We actually have a separate line item in the budget for any of your retirements if there's incentives to be paid. So again, we take a look at this and we work with our auditors. We have a reserve target and we calculate the liability for employee benefits. As we grow and people work here longer and we bring on, and we calculate this out. So if we're hiring a new staff, we base that on the maximum amount of days that they could accumulate. In some contracts, that's 260 days. So, you know, we have to make sure that if something catastrophic happened, that we would have enough to cover everyone. So the fortunate piece of this is that we're not in that situation where you have to cover everyone, because for a new teacher, in order to receive a benefit, they will receive it upon retirement. If they don't retire, they can work here 28 years and go somewhere else, they wouldn't receive that benefit. So then that calculation comes off. So right now in our MLR, we have $1.8 million. Our current pension liability for everyone is $2.7 million. Again, something utterly catastrophic would have to happen, which is not going to happen because of the way things are calculated. With the number of new staff that aren't even close to retirement, you're not gonna figure that in. You're not. But again, we were required to set up this reserve. Many districts, because of financial times, have liquidated this reserve. They've come through and absolutely liquidated. We don't need this. We're going to use it. We're going to roll the dice. My recommendation is it's good right where we have it right now. Any questions with that block? We also have an unemployment insurance reserve, again established by the board. It's funded by budgetary appropriations and again resolutions. Voter approval is not needed to spend the funds, and it's used to pay unemployment claims. So you want to be between 1% and 5% of your total payroll. One of the things to look at is that over probably the last 7-8 years, we've had in excess of 30 retirements. So we've been able to backfill positions, we've been able to move positions around, we've actually been able to say, okay, we don't need these positions, and due to attrition, we're going to absorb that into the budget. But now we're at a point where we're going to kind of stall out with retirements for a bit. So again, if the district was unable to keep someone in a position and they had to go on unemployment, you would want to have a reserve that would cover any payments. We also have unemployment insurance as well that we pay into that helps us cover that piece. So again, the $251,000 is about 1.2% of current period. It's not anything, again, it's been pretty standard to that amount. But as we move on in the future, if that's something that you need to move from reserve to reserve, then that's something to take a look at. Any questions here? Any?
Mike, when you say our enrollment has dropped significantly,
I'm talking over like the last 10 years.
Right,
So
right.
as enrollment has dropped, we've been able to say, okay, we can afford not to fill a position because we don't have, you know, and again, but you get to a certain point where you're filling classes to a certain amount, or you're running out of spots to say we don't need people. We do need people. It's not ideal to have to lay anyone off. To Tom's point, when we talked about the budget, you know, I would say right before I took this job in 2013, we had probably 35 staff members on the stage that were being considered to be laid off. So again, that's, as you start to look at this, it's good to have just a backup. We're not there right now. Again, just from historical.
Well, and the other thing I would just add quickly, you know, Mike has talked about over the last few years, you know, you lose good talent whenever somebody retires, but there's obviously a financial benefit to that because of the breakage. This year we are looking at potentially one person retiring. So we're not, unless more people come forward, which we don't anticipate, we're not going to have that savings this year.
I will gladly retire this year. I have two. The next piece is our retirement contribution reserve, again established by the board, funded in the same manner, whether it's revenues, not required by law, transfers from other reserves. Voter approval is not needed to expend the funds, and funds can be transferred to another reserve. So in this situation, you want to look at your TRS payroll. Every year for our teacher retirement system, or excuse me, ERS, our employee retirement, everyone who's not a teacher, you want to kind of look at that. Our usual bill per year is about $445,000 for ERS, right around that number. Right now, our ERS reserve is at $1.2 million, 12% of our payroll. We also have a TRS reserve. We were able to establish that. That holds $27,000 in it. Again, we had a year where we had money go over our 4% of fund balance, and we chose to move that $27,000 and create that new reserve. We've looked at it, and again, this is an area where when the comptroller gives suggestions to other districts, we have a plan to reduce by $100,000 a year if needed out of this reserve. Again, this is if needed. But we do put it on the reserve plan to say, hey, this is one, if we're gonna take it out of one, this would be one that we would. And it doesn't have to be the 100,000 either, it could be 10,000. But again, it's again as needed. So any question on the retirement contribution? The next one is always fun to say, it's the tax tertiary reserve. This is for any outstanding payments as they relate to taxes. So every year we have large corporations that reside within the district, believe that they're being overtaxed and overassessed, and they go and file a report and say with the state and with the county to say, my property is assessed at an unfair value, and I would like to challenge that. And I don't believe my property should be assessed at $1 million, I believe it should be assessed at $500,000 or less. So what happens when they pass these or they file these reports every year, we have to keep money back in a reserve in case a judge were to come forward and say, you're right, your property's not worth this. They have up to 5 years for an individual claim. So say that they were due or had overpaid their taxes by $10,000 a year, then after 5 years, we would owe them $50,000. So we keep a spreadsheet, and every year on what we've reserved, when that money, again, if it's challenged or when the challenges come off the report, and then we keep a reserve, the tax tertiary reserve, again, to hold back in case they were to come forward and say, you have to pay a claim on this, we would have the money in a reserve. That would not come directly out of general fund. That would come out of this reserve. Any questions on that? Our workers' compensation reserve, again established by the Board of Education, funded in the same way. Voter approval is not needed to expend the funds. You know, when this was set up, it was utilized to pay expenses. We were self-funded. We were one of the only districts in central New York where we were self-funded for workers' compensation. So if there was a claim to be paid out, we did not hold our own insurance. We paid it out of this fund. At one point, I was explaining to Budget and Finance, this reserve was set at $3 million. The comptroller came in and said this is not realistic, so I would say 2 building projects ago, the board voted to take $2 million out of this reserve and put it towards the capital project to offset the cost for the project. So we stand right now at $1 million, in this reserve. What we've done in the last few years is we've gone to use a group called PERMA. So we pay roughly a little under $100,000 a year to be part of PERMA. The nice thing is, any costs, no matter what, incurred while we're with PERMA are paid through that insurance. So they also cover in varying degrees. So you could have a catastrophic workers' comp claim that could clear out that reserve in a day. With going with PERMA, and we really weighed the benefits of being with an organized group, we are seeing probably in excess of at least 20 workers' comp claims a year for different issues. So again, their claims are not necessarily founded, but having PERMA is a great benefit to us right now. That where one could really draw down your amount. So any questions here? So any planned use out of this per year is that we would use it just to offset the cost of what the permanent insurance costs. And to my recollection, as of this year, our last self-funded claim has come off the books. So we are clean on that side as well. The last piece is our reserve for debt service. Again, we're required to keep a mandatory reserve for debt service. Again, with this, for any of our outstanding obligations and bonds, we have been using it quite steadily from year to year, offsetting taxpayer expense for our capital projects. And we spell that out. When we go and set up a capital project, we're going to say, we're going to plan to use X amount of money that's going to offset the cost. So we're not taxing you more because really this reserve is set up with money you've paid in taxes already. So we've used a smart planning of that use of reserves in the reserve plan. Right now our balance is $4 million. Our planned usage, and we had inflated that a little bit for 24-25, was at $600,000, and you'll see in the chart that on the bottom, that $308,000, looking at 25-26, and again, this is just a placeholder. We've not agreed to use any of these. It's just for the sake of discussion in the plan. Is that $308,000 was originally set up because that was 2% that we put on taxpayers. It's a little bit more now, but it's about $330,000. But again, that's why we put that number in there. We weren't taxing. Again, for 10 years, we stayed under 1% on average per year going out and taxing. But the other part was that we were using planned use of reserves. So again, money that we had already collected. So just taking a look at the plan for reserves, you can see where we started in 23-24, and then moving forward. I put in this year, I think it's important to see, is that through our different accounts, our interest-bearing accounts, so you can kind of see where the accounts will move and what the planned interest would be. Again, the biggest draw for that would be our debt service, where we're drawing interest on. But again, you can see the planned uses where we talked about the retirement reserve, the workers' comp reserve, and then the debt service reserve. So again, this is all planned usage, and again, this is just a plan. So the only things that are concrete right now is when you're looking at 24-25, 25-26, 26-27, and 27-28. Those are just placeholders. So again, they're moving targets for use. Any questions here? Okay. As Tom had mentioned, that we have received notification from the comptroller, and again, met with Budget and Finance today. Every year, the comptroller puts out a fiscal stress monitoring report to talk about if a district could be susceptible to stress or in stress. So again, the fiscal monitoring system kind of looks at, they do it for school districts and for other municipalities, based on different environmental and financial indicators. A score is calculated, they arrive at an overall score for governments and school districts to classify whether you're in significant stress, moderate stress, susceptible to stress, or not in any type of stress at all. Classifications of significant and moderate stress, again, kind of break down severity of that. The classification of susceptible to stress really breaks down and says, you know, are there indicators that we're seeing where you could have stress down the road? It's not an immediate alarm, but it's something to say, hey, there are some things that we're testing, and there could be something on there that designates that you have stress down the road. The areas that they're looking at for that, they're looking at your fund balance, they're looking at your revenues to expenditures, or kind of that offset. They are looking at your short-term debt, the use of short-term debt, and they're looking at your cash flow. So they want to know that you have the appropriate cash flow to make it through the year. Many districts, and again, I don't know if it's a known fact or not, is that when we enter into July and August, there really aren't any revenues coming into the district. You're kind of backfilling with some financial aid, but to get that fiscal year up and going, district will either issue a revenue anticipation notice, which is a loan, to say, all right, we got a jump start here, we're going to wait for taxes. Taxes don't start to come in until the beginning of September, so we're going to anticipate that our spending over the summer is going to be X amount of money. for us, our big ticket item, all of our bus leases come due $800,000. They come due in July. So again, you know, how do you pay for that? With us, with our reserves, which I just showed you, we can do a borrowing. It's called a due to, due from. We say we're going to borrow this amount of money until this money comes in, and both then accounts wash each other out. But again, that's when they talk about cash flow. So with this, and again, the first time in my 12 years of tenure here, we've been identified as susceptible to stress. So what I'd like to do, I took budget and finance through. I'm going to take you through if there are questions as we go through, or if budget and finance folks want to chime in with anything that we had talked about, please feel free. But what does this look like? So there are two areas. There's fiscal stress and there's environmental stress. Fiscal stress, where the 4 items I just talked about are measured. Environmental stress could be local income, what the local income levels are, taxation, free and reduced lunch. That's an environmental score. Our environmental score was perfect. It was a 0. But looking at this, if you have no designation in this, it's 0 to 24.9. Susceptible to stress, 25 to 44.9. Moderate fiscal stress, 45 to 64.9. And significant stress, 65 to 100. And looking at the last 3 years, you can see we've gone from a score of 0, perfect score, to a score of 30. How are we affected in this, or how did the point totals increase from 15 to 30? In the areas of fund balance. And I'll walk everyone through it, so it'll help answer the questions. So year-end fund balance, again, you're able to keep a 4% fund balance over and above what you have in your reserves. That 4% is 4% of your budget. So in the past, we have not really had a use of that. Another piece of that, when we put down our revenues, $680,000 a year is planned fund balance. If you take out of your planned fund balance, it draws down to your 4% fund balance. That's just how they kind of work together. So again, the comptroller looks at that and says, okay, if you're drawing out of that planned fund balance and bringing down the other number, if that comes down under 2%, then it's a flag. It's a flag that will assign points. If you come down under 3%, it flags it at 7 points. If you come down under 2%, it flags it at 15 points. So that's where we kind of went from one year to the other. The other part are operating deficits. So if you have less revenue than you have with your expenditures, you have to take that money from somewhere. Where did that money come from? We took it from our planned fund balance to offset that. Again, year 1, we ended up with a score of 15. That doesn't fall under any designation, it's fine. This year, and again I'll explain, that we looked at our planned aid versus actual aid. Last year, our planned aid versus our actual aid, we shared this last year with the board and with budget and finance. The difference, we had a negative $635,000 that we did not receive from the state. In addition to that, based on a pandemic adjustment, again, during the beginning of COVID, we had bus drivers, it was great, and staff coming in and feeding families across the district. We were paying bus drivers every day to drive these buses. The state came back and said, this was not for pupil transportation, we're not going to aid that. So they didn't aid the salaries during that. We knew it was coming, but we didn't know how much. Again, from 2020 to 2021, they wanted their money last year. So what they do in that situation, they withhold aid. They don't make you pay them back, they withhold it. So in that situation, we had an $815,000 reduction in aid, unplanned. With that, we build a buffer into the budget every year for unplanned expenses. We had several unplanned expenses last year that had to do with personnel and had to do with programming. And again, with those two mixtures, with a reduction in aid and unplanned expenses, it caused us to dip into, and I'll show you here. And again, this just is an illustration before I get to the next point, so I'm sorry I jumped ahead. This shows you that for 23-24, this is what they said on the left the aid was going to be, just so you know that these are the reports we take and build our budget. Then, looking at last year, oh, by the way, when this comes out in June or January, that number is going to be cut. So in the past, we've had a buffer built into the budget. We haven't had to go tell people, hey, we're gonna have to lay you off, or we're gonna have to cut back, we're fiscally sound, which we still were last year. We went back to the board at the end of last year and said, for this, I'm gonna ask you to release $500,000 from debt service to offset those costs as revenue, which we have the ability to do through reserves. So we did that. The remaining $315,000 was released from our planned use of fund balance. We put that in as a revenue. And I will say to folks, when I did that, in my mind, I wasn't saying, oh yeah, by the way, there's gonna be a report that comes out, if I dip below this amount, we're gonna get put on the naughty list. So, chose to do that. We took it out, we did it at the end of June, and by doing that, we dropped below the 2%. We chose to take, and again, the district, to take money out of pot A instead of pot B. If we'd taken all the money out of pot A, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. Because we took it all, we took some out of pot A, and again, you figure $400,000 is about 1%. We took out, we were well over 2%, and we took out the money out of that and dropped below. So moving forward, how do we, number one, not have this conversation again that we're on the list, is that every year we put in a financial memo to say that if we're over 4%, that money is going to go to a capital reserve, or we have also put it in TRS. And looking at this, if we're in a situation that we're going to be below 2%, we would take it out of a reserve rather than take it out of planned fund balance. So the last piece is, again, the reminder that it sends up an alarm. It's very unsettling. If you were in my house, as I shared with Budget and Finance yesterday at about, I don't know, 6:54 in the morning, and you watch my Apple Watch, my heart rate went from about resting of 62 to about 150 because we hadn't planned that they were going to put the report out yet. So we could sit with you today and explain it. It came out yesterday morning. When people see fiscal stress, they immediately will jump, and again, it's human nature, to say, oh my goodness, we don't have any money. That's not the case. The case is that we took money out of one pot instead of the other, which again, through the 4 different pieces of the measuring system, again, the 4 things that the comptroller chooses to use is in the report, that it tripped the number. So there's a means to make sure that doesn't happen anymore. And again, it causes us to go back through and look and say, okay, as we're going through this, and again, we had talked about it with audit committee, that he said, just keep an eye on your fund balance. Everything's good, your audit's good, but keep an eye on your fund balance. So that's something that we will continue to do. And that would be my recommendation. I've thrown a lot at you. Please feel free to ask questions, or if any of the budget and finance folks would like to.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, I've listened to you explain that a bunch of times, and that was very thorough. Nice job.
Yeah.
Well, again, I think it's
I really
important.
appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it's important that people understand that, and then,
Yeah.
you know, I believe the district prides itself on our sound financial position, and we want to make sure that if someone were to come up on you, you know, in public and say, hey, what about this? And as board members, you know, I want you to have the information on what that looks like. So, again, we are in a good financial position here in the district. It's something that, you know, I don't pride myself, you know, being the financial person in the district to have that list, being as though we were at a perfect score a couple years ago. But apparently I bragged to Mr. Church too many times that we got a perfect score. So, again, if people have questions about this afterwards, or, you know, something comes up, please feel free to email me or to reach out. I'm happy to go through this. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Now we'll move to new business. Need a motion to approve the reports from the Committee on Preschool Special Education.
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments?
The instinct I looked up for Mr. Moore.
I know. Make it drive down.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Need a motion to approve the reports from the Committee on Special Education.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion to approve the disposal of items from the high school.
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Need a motion to approve the 25-26 district calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments?
I'm gonna point out on that calendar, it doesn't have the lunar year, and it's because it's part of the February break.
That's right.
Like, I looked that up, and if people are like, we had it one year and then it's gone.
Yeah, it's right in the
It's
middle of
actually
that, yep.
During our break, so.
Further questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion to approve, yeah, got it coming from here, but, motion to approve the budget guidelines.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion to approve the 24-25 reserve plan.
So,
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion to approve the Cortland County Threat Assessment Management Team Agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Superintendent Clerk, informational items.
Yes, we have some fundraising updates from the high school. We have our FFA group doing a couple of fundraisers here as we move through the remainder of the winter time. They'll be selling some strawberries and some maple syrup in January and February.
Don't believe we have any community voices. Eddie's gonna go check, but I don't,
In the effort of being thorough,
I appreciate that.
sheet is clean.
Anybody wishing to be heard? Not seeing anybody moving in that direction, so board committee reports, anything additional from budget and finance for the good of the order?
Thank you, Mike.
All right. We'll move to district committee reports.
Yes, we have a couple. I've asked Mr. Ebner to share an update on the Professional Learning Committee, and we also had a STEAM committee meeting recently that we wanted to update the folks with.
Yes, update on PLC meeting, it has been moved due to the snow date to next Wednesday, February 5th at 4 o'clock in this very location. And again, just for the board's knowledge, that group is the group that plans our professional development days. It's part of the HTEC contract, and we always have a very good turnout for those meetings. And then the second thing I would like to update you on is, beginning of last year, we created, for better term, STEAM advisory team. Let me kind of explain to you. There's this push in public education around STEM, right? Some districts call it STEAM, some districts call it STEM. So we created a subcommittee of ILC, and we're calling it the STEAM advisory team. It's made up of a group of volunteer teachers, many not necessarily on ILC, but eventually the work that we do in the STEAM advisory team will be the work of ILC. We, over the last year, we have done a great job, one, defining what STEM/STEAM is going to be for the Homer Central School District. We have selected the acronym STEAM, the group, by an overwhelming majority of teachers and staff in the room, the administrators, that we want to include, because STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. We also want to include the arts, which includes the humanities. And the first thing we did was to define what STEAM education is. That took a little bit of legwork, took a couple meetings, but we can't implement and we can't measure what we can't define. So just for the board's sake, the definition, and you'll see this later on, hopefully tail end of this year when we finalize some of our goals for next year. STEAM is an approach to learning that integrates multiple subjects to emphasize critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, effective communication, and a community perspective. Students will take risks, challenge their thinking, reflect on and revise their learning. all of those things can happen beyond a science classroom, beyond a technology classroom, beyond an engineering classroom, beyond a mathematics classroom. So what we're saying is this is an approach to teaching and learning that teachers can employ in any educational setting in the district, inside, outside, traditional classroom, gymnasium, weight room, fitness center, you name it. This approach to education can take place anywhere. As a group, we've identified where this work is already happening. That was a big part of our work early on. We've identified potential areas where this work is going to be on, or where this work can happen within our district. And lastly, what we did at our most recent meeting 2 weeks ago, we began the process to write 2 to 3 goals that we can accomplish as a group, as a STEAM advisory team in our district by December of 2025. Why December 2025? I think, and Homer's not one, but a lot of districts get involved in initiative fatigue. Last year's new thing, this year's new thing, next year's new thing. People get sick and tired of initiatives. Our goal is to tie the work together from year to year to year, where the initiative doesn't change. The goals stretch from one year to the next, and we're not making people's heads turn left and right because there's something new coming out all the time. So again, a group of volunteer staff members in the district, teachers, administrators, I can't be more pleased with the movement we've made in this area, with more work to come, of course. But thank you for letting me report out. Does the board have any questions on our STEAM advisory team?
You mentioned that there were some ideas of how this was going to expand into other things, and some ideas. Was there any like cool ideas that stick out from that?
You know, simple thing. Simple. It's not simple, but you know, joining the Lego League. You know, there's districts around us that are. So we looked at districts around. What are they doing in these areas? So Lego League was one of them. Enhancing our robotics program. Looking at our activity periods, are the things we can do in those areas regarding technology. One of the ideas that keeps coming back to the table is how can we get our community partners into our schools? You know, our STEM related partners out there that we don't partner with right now come into our schools, work with our teachers, work with our kids. Like Mr. Turk's trip, I think it ties in nicely with careers. Like these things can lead to problem solving. I can't name a job where you don't have or need that skill. Critical thinking, I can't think of a job where you don't need that skill. So partnering with that's one of the ones coming up over and over and over again. And this group, it seems like they know everybody. It's amazing to me, it's great. So they're reaching out to those folks who own businesses in the area to find opportunities where they can come in and work with our students. And it fits our curriculum already. So we're not creating something new just to get our partners into the school. Yeah, it's good. It's an amazing group of educators doing great work. Any other? Thank you.
Thank you.
Moves us to our board member activities.
I did an activity last November. I asked everyone if I could represent you and tour the buildings. So I did that, and I finished it, and I made a slideshow I wanted to share with you. So, can you help me? And Mr. Turk and I had talked and stuff, and so I should preface it that this slideshow is going to point out flaws, okay? Not to be taken negative, but that's the purpose of the walkthrough, was to not do all the things that are finished, but checking out like where some stuff stands that still needs to wrap up. And we've chatted. He's going to bring the professionals in and give a professional presentation on this, where everything stands.
Yeah, because as part of the capital project, you develop a punch list, and that's where we are in our project now. And we'll have the folks come on February 11th to update us. And many of these that Amy will show you are already on, if not all, most of them are on the punch list already.
So what I did after I got permission, I reached out to all the administrators, and then the holidays got in the way, which was part of the huge delay. So I just finished this last week. I met with each one of them. It was about an hour or so. After the meeting, I followed up with an email that this was my takeaway. Please let me know if I misunderstood, if you agree with these things, that kind of thing. So unfortunately, they're not here tonight to say, but everybody knows what was going on here. So I started with Mr. Duckman. And this was in the high school. There's a section when you look up, the tiles aren't there. This was not an active leak though, okay, I should point that out. It's just missing tiles. And then as we walked around, you can see, where's the pointer? Here. Is this the pointer? So if you look at this trim board here, this becomes a constant theme. It's not just in this building. It's a type of retrofit on the trim. It's not on both sides of the hallway though. So this one bathroom has a trim board like that. This bathroom here, this one doesn't have its final paint job yet. And then this is the front of the building. So that couple bathrooms were set up like that. The doors weren't the final doors. And then here's the front of the building where they haven't, this is gonna be a time sensitive thing, with a product like this, that you just have to do your finishing touch on that. So I suspect when the weather is warmer, they can use their product. While I was there, we went through this one area. I just want to bring it to your attention with the budget and all of the things that are coming up. This is going into our library. It's an expired carpet. This is a threshold and it's starting to pull away, and I just want you to know about it. Like at some point, we'll have to talk about the library floor. This is just the details of the takeaways. The bathroom still needs some finishing. There's some trim stuff. There was a stall that, when I saw it, there was already a bolt off. I think it would benefit from thread lock, but it could be a weight distribution thing with the stalls, I don't know, but there was something going on there. I didn't check out any of the roof repairs, it's cold, so I have no feedback on that part of the capital improvement project. I want to make sure you know about the carpet for the library, that's going to be coming up at some point. And the windows. That building is really going to need a lot of windows when we get around to it. There are windows that don't work, and the products to fix some of them are becoming obsolete. So that should be on our radar too for something happening in the future. The PA system works. Sometimes there's a little bit of issues, so I don't know about that one. So this is my walkthrough with Mrs. Schneider. You look up, ceiling tiles out of place, not an active leak though. But again, this is what our kids see. I put this window in here not because it was part of the project, but just as a reminder that not all of our windows have been replaced over there, so that should still be on the list, that there's some windows over there that are missing seals and still need to be addressed at some point. This one I wish I had backed up for you, okay? This is a gorgeous, brand new window that went in. It's just beautiful up by that ag room. And then there's this part that just needs to be fixed. Okay, this is the bathrooms. See this here, this hole? This is a vent area without a vent. So this is a theme in her building specifically. She would know better than me, but there's at least 5 or 6 of these vents that are missing. In the high school, they're back installed, but in this building specifically, they didn't get put back in yet. So this is a hole in the, kids can't necessarily reach it, but it's there. This is a stall that bothers me. That's why I added it. This is in the girls' bathroom. This is something that we had asked the engineers to pay attention to, and this is not a comfortable stall. This is another thing that happens. Lots of like this. Now this one here, this only has 1 screw. I show you 3, but there's many more. Okay, so like that finishing work will look a lot nicer for the kids. This is in the library area. You have this threshold here that just needs a finishing piece, and then this here. They're just little cosmetic things that like are on the punch list. They're going to be addressed, but I want you to know if you hear people talking about it, this is what it is. This is where our sink was removed for the update, and everything's still there for a new sink. This is the library also. This is our nurse's office. So if you remember, it wasn't ready when school started, so it was like a big push to get that one ready. These are some of the things that happened. This here, this is a seam from where they installed the corner for the sheetrock. The seal's broken, so it maybe dried too fast or didn't have enough spackle underneath the corner. But this is right as you walk into the nurse's office. These are just gaps that are underneath, more gaps here. The nurses were more than happy to show me around and to show this stuff. There's another thing going on in the nurse's office that should probably be considered. They have touchless faucets, which are amazing and awesome, but they don't actually like them because they can't do warm water for gargling, they can't do cold water for a drink. So they wanted me to know that they're cool, but they're not exactly the most beneficial for that room. This is the bathroom. This is multiple places in the bathroom there. That, here's that trim board again, just placed in like that. So this is just more like floor molding and things, just need finishing touches. Like I said, they were happy to share. Takeaways, the ag room, they're real high tables, so they're not most beneficial for all of the different things that are gonna be happening up there. But everything else I think that I was able to share. Some of their new heat is not working correctly, so I imagine that's a huge nightmare for everybody involved in that one. And I know there's more heat work that's happening in that building too, so that's a big one. There's no pictures to show you, but that's a big active thing that's happening and going on. Their PA system does not work, it is not reliable. And they also have a lot of out in the open storage. They don't really have a good storage area. So maybe at some point, we can talk about how the storage isn't where the kids walk in their face like that. It would be nice to give it a more clean look through the halls. So that was the junior high. That was probably the hardest one with a punch list item of stuff going on. And I think Kara was able to do it with me because she still had her intern to walk around the building with me, so I thought that was great. She could do that. Then I went over to the intermediate with Mrs. Falls, and it's not, so when, when you walk into the building, you look up, there's holes in the ceiling. The good news is the tiles are there, so I'm sure it's gonna happen. This is something going on in her building often. It's just these random things were removed, and it's just not finished. It doesn't have its finished look. And here she has the same thing with the vent covers are missing. This is a ceiling tile that's missing from her bathrooms. Her place was in really good shape though. You know, it had a few things. Here you go again with this outlet cover. It's only got one screw holding it in. Just little things like this. This here is in the library. It's still raw wood, so I'm assuming there's going to be some type of finishing product going on to that, just to give it a finished look. This room here, so this room is behind the gym. It's between the gym and the hallway, and it's going to be like a, correct me if I'm wrong, like a physical therapy and like a multi-use. And it's interesting. It's not the same look as the rest of the building. It's going to have this. This is all finished up here, so this is all going to be finished and exposed. It's got the padded walls. This is where they're having their field office right now. So this is where the engineers come in every day, and this is going to be really neat. I think this is going to be a great addition for that building. It's probably one of the last things on the list, but it's going to be cool when it comes through. These were the takeaways there. The one thing that I didn't show you, the basketball hoops, we had new hoops installed, and they're either not broken in or they're not working right, or something's not totally right about them. I'm hoping that when the engineers come, they can share what the deal is on that one. And her elevator at that time was not currently working, so I wanted you to know about that. The PA system, she says it's not a huge issue, but there are sometimes some issues with the PA system, so. I don't know where technology stands for PA systems, but at some point, maybe we talk about that one too. And then last but not least, we got the elementary, and Mr. Pascarella and Mrs. Hamas were both able to walk around with me. This was, this was a ceiling going on in the elementary where there was something they were watching at the time. So this is, I wanted to share, it's in each building, it kept coming up. Now these I don't have pictures of all of them, but this type of situation, this stuff here, this is only 2 screws in a 4-box. But this happens a lot in this building. A lot of different retrofit upgrades, things of that sort that we're just waiting on that like final crisp look to finish it off. This here, this is beautiful. This is like a raw iron, it's beautiful. It used to be a plexiglass thing. It should have something added in here because it's a 2nd story. But it's very beautiful. It was done in nice taste. here is that theme again with the trim board. This is a problem they're running into with their sinks. This little girl I just happened to be walking by, she can barely reach. So because of their age, they're having some struggles with the height of the sinks. And I saw it with my own eyes. This is another bathroom where we walked in and the faucet was just running. Could be a faulty faucet, I don't know, but it's something going on in one of their bathrooms. This is a bathroom, this is the view from the hall when you walk by this bathroom. This one we maybe could use a little retrofit or some help here. The takeaways from theirs were basically everything that I was able to mention. There's some concerns about the sound control in the cafeteria, and they do have plenty of windows still to be updated, so they should also be in consideration when we're doing focus on some of our windows and bringing things up to date. So that was that one. I did not walk through the Bonnet. Neither Mrs. Schneider or Mrs. Falls were able, they knew there was work going on, but they didn't know the standing on all of it. And the press box, I never reached out to Todd or anybody for checking out on how that is. But that's some of what's going on. And when the engineers come, I think it'll be a much better update with more detail and probably less on the list. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got just one quick one. Last week, I was one of 3 board members that was on the interview committee for the buildings and ground supervisor. I believe there were 12 of us on it. I thought it was a very, very productive session. I really, and Mike coordinated the whole thing, and I thought it went very good.
Kelly was a big help behind the scenes, so. I'm gonna take credit.
Some of the candidates said.
Kelly makes it happen, so.
The interview was over with before they got to us, you know?
Right.
Any additional activities? Upcoming events, Superintendent?
Yes, Amy had mentioned the Asian Lunar New Year, that's tomorrow, so students and staff will not be in session. We also have some exciting high school area all-state this weekend taking place at Ithaca College. So the kids are out and about and active, so it's good.
All right, and with that, I entertain a motion to move to executive session to discuss the employment of a particular person or persons.
So moved.
All those in favor?